So start again. Welcome everyone. I'm Susan Stone and I'm a longtime radio producer, reporter, and podcaster. I've worked with NPR, Deutsche Welle, Radio Netherlands, and Monocle Radio, among others. And I produce and host the Dead Ladies Show podcast, which is based on live events that started in Berlin and have since moved to include New Zealand, New York, and Belgium, and soon more, I hope. So I called my workshop Sound and Vision. Next slide. Not only because it's the title of an excellent David Bowie song, but also because both aspects are important to creating a successful podcast or any audio project. I think everyone knows what a podcast is, right? Wave your hand if that's yes. Everybody knows what a podcast is. That's good. Just so quickly, it's an audio program or segment that lives on the internet and is usually free to download and listen to. If you subscribe, it comes automatically to your podcatcher or phone or tablet like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts, or streams on Spotify and plays on your smart device. So I like this definition of what a podcast is. Podcasts are radio that no one can stop you from doing. This is a quote from Deborah Francis White. She's the host of the Guilty Feminist podcast, which is a great podcast. If you don't know it, it's based on a live show. And this is sort of an important idea that you have the freedom. This is kind of like freed from, I can't say it's completely freed from monetary costs, but you have so much freedom and ability to create that, no one can stop you from doing it, pretty much. How many podcasts are there? So too many? I don't know. There are 1 million is the estimated now, and over 30 million episodes on Apple as of April 2020. So that's an awful lot. Just something to think about as you get started. Okay, we're going to start with the vision. In the next slide, we're going to see some questions that we need to ask ourselves as we get started. What is this? What do we want to accomplish? What makes us distinctive compared to other similar podcasts? Do we have time, people, resources to make this? Is this to support and market the publication, the project, the artist, the writer, or does it have some kind of different goal? Because a lot of you are working in the literary sector, you may be writers, you may be publishers. This may in fact be that last question. Is it to support and market your organization? Which is fine, that's a great goal. Do you also want to bring translated literature to a broader audience? Do you want to broaden interest in African literature or Asian literature or German literature? What is the sort of goal that you want to do and what do you need to do to get there? So these are just some questions that you need to kind of go through when you start planning. So next, we're going to think about some more detailed questions. When we think about the details of how to make a successful podcast or how to make a podcast at all, you really do have to kind of go through all these questions. What are we calling your podcast? Think of a name that is somewhat unique, but still tells people what to expect. Our podcast is called the Dead Lady Show podcast. People laugh, they say it is what it says on the tin. It is a show about dead ladies. It is a history show about women from history who did amazing things while they were alive. Who's working on this project and when? Do you have time budgeted? Do you have someone dedicated to do reporting or someone dedicated to do online, or is that all you? And if so, can you budget your own time to make that so that you don't burn out when adding this extra new project to your already full plate? Can you describe the project in one memorable sentence? This is your elevator pitch. Maybe while we're going through some of these things, either before the break or at the end when I take more questions, you might think if you have an elevator pitch, if you can do one on the fly, and I might ask and see if anybody can come back and do that. As I said, for the Dead Lady Show, it's amazing stories, amazing true stories of women from history told live on stage in Berlin. So that's pretty quick. I can tell it to someone in an elevator. They'll like it or they won't, but they'll understand what we're about. What will success look like for this podcast? Is that going to be releasing 4 episodes? Is that going to be releasing 3 years worth of programs? Will it be having 10,000 listeners, 200 listeners? It's really an individual tailored, and as you know, for people in writing and literature in any field, your success is up to your own definitions. So we do take examples from other successful podcasts and existing podcasts, but you need to know what is going to make it work for you and be worth putting your time into it. The obstacles, same thing. Is it money? Is it time? Is it equipment? How often will you publish? Do you want to have a weekly podcast, monthly? Do you want to have a season, release it by season or episode? We think of binge watching on something like Netflix, they release generally a season. So you have 8 episodes coming out at once. That will require quite a bit of production time in advance, or interviews, or whatever it is that you're planning to do. You need to have the time up front to create that season if you want to release it all at once. It's really up to you. You can do it episode by episode. You can release quarterly. The important thing is that you try to be regular with it, and you communicate with your audience as to when the next episode is coming. Now, how long will it be? Will your podcast be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour? Certainly, I tend to err on the side of 45 minutes or less these days. If you are presenting a sort of a live event, sometimes it might be a little longer. Why not short stories, poems? Again, this is a format that is not limited. A podcast is not a talk show, and a podcast is not half an hour long. You really have a lot of freedom in what you want to do, and it's up to you to define that. It is a good idea to figure out what that concept is and then communicate that with their listeners so they know what to expect. Will it be edited? I hope so. We all know the value of a good editor. That is something you have to learn. But if you're doing an interview or conversational podcast, you do have a little bit more leeway of not having to spend as much time editing. Will you have theme music or other music? Most podcasts do. Open with some kind, or close with some kind of jingle or other music. Where will you get it? Well, you cannot use licensed copyrighted pop music, jazz music, any kind of music, unless you have permission and have paid the license. We do have GEMA in Germany. It's a little complicated to navigate. Some people do it quite successfully, but I find it a bit complicated personally. You can get a lot of good music from the Free Music Archive, use music from your friends, create your own music, but that is something you have to keep in mind if you want to integrate music into your podcast. Same thing with clips and readings and other elements. I know there was a session earlier on copyright and readings and literature. Using copyrighted material, you do have to limit it. Journalistically, educationally, there's kind of a loosey-goosey idea that you could use about less than 30 seconds. It's generally safe, but it's also something to be very careful about. Will you be primarily talking? Will it be your voice and someone else's voice, a monologue, a conversation, a drama, a debate? These are all things you may already know when you think about what you want to do. Will it be special or recurring features? Again, this is something that's a kind of a nice way to mix up your podcast, give it a little texture. So if you're planning to do an interview podcast, you could have like once a month, a short segment, say 2 minutes on somebody's top, maybe somebody's top books of the season, or maybe somebody's favorite recipe from a book, or something like this, a short segment of some sort that you can pre-tape. You can do a lot of them in advance. If you are in the business of interviewing authors, ask them at the end of your interview, do you have a favorite recipe from a book, or do you have a favorite, I don't know, perfume that was mentioned in a book, or whatever kind of creative thing that you want to do. If you have these sorts of short segments, they make for kind of a really nice texture and punctuation for your podcasts. And it's also nice to have something on what we call the shelf, which means that you have something done before you have to move to the next one. If you have a regular podcast and somebody drops out, you have a guest drop out. Well, if you have an interview already on your shelf, then you feel so much better knowing, okay, I can quickly pull this off the shelf and run this, and I will not miss my deadline, or I will not be completely stressed out, or these kinds of things. These are kind of things, I pulled from journalistic expertise, but it does definitely make you feel a lot better when you have these sorts of things to pull from. We need to think about the audience as well and how we're going to communicate with them. I'm going to kind of zap through this because I have a feeling we're going to run out of time here and I can't see the clock. For anyone working in any kind of media or arts, I'm 10 minutes in. Okay. So for anyone working for any media or arts, that's something that that you already know about. And if you do have an existing property, whether it's yourself or a book or a magazine, this is a great source to draw from. And you want to know, what are these people doing while they're listening to you? Who are they? What are they like? How will they share you? What kinds of things will they want to share from your show? And what will they talk about after the show? So these are all sort of things to think about. And as I say, when you try to define an audience, be as specific as you can when you're kind of visualizing. Yeah, if you say everyone who likes books, that's a really big audience, I hope. And if you define it a bit further to people 18 to 80 who like translated fiction, that's a little bit that's a little bit more defined. Okay, so we can go on to the next one. And I know I'm rushing, I'm sorry about that, but I have so many things to tell you. Okay, what kind of podcast? We talked a little bit about this: interview, performance, narrative, reported, and why not create something completely new? So I'm just going to show you here on the next screen a few examples that are quite fun. And these represent some of the examples. So I don't know if anyone has heard of George's podcast. Have you heard George's podcast? If you have not heard George's podcast, you actually really need to hear George's podcast. It's by George the poet. It's a really amazing piece of work. It's part audio drama, poetry, personal narrative, soundscapes, and it's really one of a kind. So that's the why not do something new of the bunch. Obscure is a podcast from a comedian in the US, Michael Ian Black. He reads Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure and comments on it, so also quite funny. Phoebe reads a mystery. This is Phoebe Judge is a popular host of Criminal, which is a smart crime podcast. She reads a classic mystery like Agatha Christie's The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Now this book, as well as Thomas Hardy, are both no longer under copyright, so that's why they can do that. In other words, read the whole book and release it as a podcast. And then a couple others. She Done It is about the Golden Age mysteries. It's a mix of things. And Here Today is a very in-depth multi-year project that's documentary and many, many other things. And it's about forgotten author Georgette Hare. So these are all kind of art literary podcasts that you may or may not have heard from. And there's many, many more out there to find, including another new one from Berlin that I don't have up there called the Dear Poetry podcast, which is where poets give advice and answer personal problems using poetry. So there's a lot of room for creativity. Okay, so production. This is might be something that most people know less about. And it's great fun for me because I'm a longtime radio producer and I really enjoy it, but I know it can be stressful for other people. What do I need to start a podcast? The basics: you need a good idea. That's what we've been talking about. That really is not so basic. What do you need? You need a good idea, as we talked about. You need something to record with. You need something to edit with, somewhere to store the podcast, and a way to get it to other people. Right, what do I need to record? So first I'll talk about some of the things on the screen, and then I brought a couple things with you, which I can then quickly show you. So you can do just about everything with a smartphone. That's what's great. Most people have them. If you don't, you can borrow one. And you really can use the voice memo app very effectively. I have, since the lockdown, produced 2 or 3, 4, 5 podcasts using smartphone audio, and it's worked out just fine. You have a voice memo app on your phone, regardless of which smartphone, well, at least for Apple and Android, Samsung systems. So that is a great place to start. You can also record with an app, as that got in the little picture. It's called Anchor. Anchor is a easy to use podcast program or app. You can also host your podcast there. Anchor is currently free. It is owned by Spotify. Will it be free forever? We just don't know. The intermediate, what I would say, would be recording with a USB microphone connected directly to your computer or tablet. And you can see some examples in the picture. There are various kinds. You can buy them online. You can buy them at your local music store. There's a lot of advice out there on there. So I'm not going to tell you what kind to buy because I actually don't use this method, but a lot of people do, and it's very popular and quite easy to use. With that, you will need a digital audio system, but we'll talk about that next. Now, digital audio recorder with or without mic, this is what I use because these materials are also sort of standard for recording in the field for journalists. Last but not least, a friend with a studio. Do you know Bjork? I do not. I wish I did. I do not have a studio, and I do kind of, you know, make my own. So quickly, let's go to me on the camera, if you don't mind. And I'm going to show just a couple more versions of what we see on the screen. I showed the H1. Huh? Oh, okay, great. So what I had on the screen was the H1 and the H6 from Zoom. Yeah, I will. I haven't gotten there yet. Thank you. This one that's in my hand is H2. And this one it's actually a Tascam. It's a different brand, but it's an H4. these various models, the ones that I showed on the previous screen, which you can go back to if you like, the little one that has a kind of round bit at the top, that's about 88 euros. The more complicated one has several inputs for microphones. That's about, I believe, 400 euros plus the cost of the microphones. The ones that I held up are respectively 145 and 250, and it depends on how complicated they are and what you need. I do recommend very highly that you use a foam pop filter or some other kind of pop filter that prevents you from going popping your peas and making other kind of mouth noises, and they're very inexpensive, and you can get them either they come with the device or they might come, you might have to buy it separately. And it will make your podcast sound much more professional. So when you're recording as I said, I think the Voice Memo app records an M4A file. This is a decent quality. It's really improved in the last few years. I prefer to record MP3s, which a lot of us know, of course, from music, for higher quality audio. WAV files, if you're really going to archive them, those are the best. They are quite large. So if you start collecting them on your computer, you will need a backup drive. Okay, this is just a quick fun thing, recording remotely, since a lot of us are having to do these remote projects during the lockdown. It's a lot easier than you think. There's just a graphic here showing how you can do this with a mobile phone, and it's very easy, and the person can just send you the file. So I've been conducting interviews like this during the lockdown. I probably will continue to. We also had the host of one of the podcasts I produce record his audio this way, and I coached him over Skype. So smartphones have just been a tremendous gift for us during this time period. Also, a lot of podcasters from my acquaintance record via Zoom, like we're doing right now. You can record interviews in relatively decent quality like this if everyone's wearing a headset. And there are other programs like Clean Feed and Squadcast, which are designed to record the audio of a video call for you, and then you can edit it. This is the fun picture. Build your own home studio. So yes, you can. You can create a great sound environment for yourself at home. You can build a pillow fort. You can build another kind of pillow fort. And you can build this sort of foam box, which is the most similar to what I use myself. I do have foam like that, and I haven't cut it. I have the sheets. They're about 1/3 of a meter square. I think that's right. And I take them with me to interviews to help in an atmosphere where you have a lot of glass, you have a lot of empty corners, like the room that we're in. We do have some sound baffling in here, which is great because it's a theater. I see some of you have bookcases behind you. That's really ideal. That's something a lot of people have. If you record in a room with bookcases, curtains, a carpet if you have one, a bed. You can also use a laundry rack hung with a duvet. You can put blankets on a folding screen. This is another thing that I do at home because when I record, I have usually 2 people sitting on a sofa up against a bookcase. We have a folding screen. We put a blanket over it, and then I kind of arrange my foam and my pillows around. So it doesn't really look like something that I want to show you, but it works, and it's surprisingly effective. I have in the past also sat under a laundry rack hung with a duvet. It's not always the most comfortable. You can sit on your bed with a duvet over your head. It really does help. And if you are using a USB mic and you're sitting at your laptop, a lot of those microphones that are designed for podcasting, they pick up the audio more in the front. They don't have as much facility on the side and the back. So anyway, sorry, if you do have one of these microphones, it will be picking up more facing you. So you will benefit maybe from having some sound baffling, a blanket or something, or a bookcase behind you. But you want to sort of try it out and see how it sounds, because even if you have a really great quality podcasting microphone like that, it can only help you sound more professional to sort of take out. I see Anya sitting in a corner, a very sharp angle there, like maybe kind of an attic. That would not be, I would put a pillow in that corner before I record it, and that would help dampen some of the sound that would bounce off of that. So there's just some things to think about, that it's really sort of easier than you think. And listen to when you're recording. It's very important to wear headphones when you're recording and when you're editing. And you can play around with the pillows, the blankets, and get the sound to where it sounds really professional, and no one would know that you're sitting surrounded by 18 pillows. You sound great. Okay. And you should, when you enter a room, think for a minute, listen what do I hear in this room? Do I hear air conditioning? Do I hear a fan running? Is there a dog barking? A lot of the windows, contemporary windows, have very good sound insulation as well. You may suddenly notice your refrigerator sound. You can unplug it while you record in the kitchen. Don't forget to plug it back in. Some people have forgotten this for 3 days, not me, luckily. But there's a lot of sound in our environment. Computers also can make noise, so please wear your headphones and listen to what you're hearing. If you're recording in the field, which can be fun, go to the park, go to a cafe. Don't go in the cafe. Have you ever heard an espresso machine? You do not want that in the middle of your interview. That's very stressful. So if you are in a sort of challenging sound environment like this, record about 2 minutes of sound from what's around you. People walking by, the birds, people clanking silverware, and you can use that to help smooth out your interview, to go in and out of it. And also if you have to make an edit that's kind of tricky, you can use this wild sound or room tone to help smooth out the recording later. So what do I need to edit? If you do not use an all-in-one app, Anchor is the only one that I know of off the top of my head, you will need a digital audio workstation, or DAW, which is just an audio editing program or app. I like Audacity. It is free. It works on Mac and PC. Not everyone likes it, but I use it. I actually own Pro Tools, which is a professional program, and I never use it. I bought it because of Bjork. We could blame her. But it's beautiful, but it's too complicated for what I need. So I use Audacity. If you know Pro Tools, use it. If you know some other program, use it. You can use GarageBand, which comes standard, I believe, with Mac computers. Hindenburg is another program for journalists. Reaper is another one. A lot of programs have a 30-day free license that you can try it out with. Ableton Live is another one that's popular for musicians. The prices are sort of between $60 or sort of between $50 and $85, depending on the program. Reaper, for example, has a temporary license right now for those working from home, social distancing. I don't know how long it's free for, but they have also at least a 30-day free trial. But a lot of people are happy with Audacity. It's free, it updates a lot, and it's relatively easy to use. And there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube for most of these programs, which is great. What should you be editing? It's kind of up to you. Do you want to edit out breaths and coughs? Do you want to have the ability to start and stop and change your mind? If you're comfortable editing, you can make it sound more and more professional. There are certainly programs that will take out breaths for you or make things go faster. Okay, so the next slide, please. This is pretty simple. Where does my podcast live? You will need a podcast host. You can host it on your own podcast website. The files will take up space. 1 second of audio is approximately 1 megabyte of data, depending on how you save it. So you might run out of storage on your podcast. Podcast hosts, some are free up to a point. SoundCloud is very easy to start with, free up to 3 hours of audio. It is not ideal for podcasts because it does not have all the categories. Anchor, free. They have ads, which I think you can opt out of. They take a cut of the ads. Not everybody wants ads and a podcast. That would be me. But there are other inexpensive programs like podcast hosts like Libsyn, Spreaker, Podigy. I mean, there's quite a few, so you have to do a little research, just like a web hosting service, and see which one suits your needs. How do I get my podcast out there? So your podcast will be distributed by your podcast host via an RSS feed. That means, I think, really simple syndication. Mostly they will be sent automatically to Apple, Google, and so on. You might have to add it manually to 1 or 2 other services depending on your host. Like Anchor is owned by Spotify. They may exempt other ones and you have to do it by hand. Those kinds of things, it sort of depends on the podcast host, but most will put you in Apple and all the big ones. Okay, and the rest, how do you get your podcast out there? That I think is Yvonne's topic. That part will be up to you as to how you find your audience. And I'll give you these things. These are the don'ts. This is no fun. We talked about a lot of these things. You know, don't be afraid to stop if you don't like what you're doing. You know, a podcast is free. A podcast is very personal. You do not have to do it if you don't want to. If you'll feel like you have a commitment to your audience, but they'll understand. It's a very free form. It's kind of like zines in a way, and it's very free form, and I think people understand. Don't use copyrighted material. We talked about that. And also feel like you can change, you can relaunch, you can adjust. You have a lot of freedom and you should take advantage of it. And don't forget to have fun. Where to get help? Okay. Transom.org is a really good place. This is a US public broadcasting site with lots of info and advice. That's where I got the picture of the box recording place. And they have a lot of great information. Facebook groups, Podcaster Support Group is a good one. Lady Pod Squad is for women podcasters, many more in English, German, various languages. YouTube, as I said, is a lot of tips on editing software. There's a Berlin podcast meetup, and you can find one in your own city or your own area or your own language. And also here at Schreiben and Leben, there are consultations, Beratungen, which I have done in German and can also do in English. And you can contact me with your questions.